Okay, class, the next step I'm going to show you is how you're going to get a tie shape out of your tie pattern. We have here the 4 different layers, 4 different colorways of the same tie pattern, which you might have noticed when you saved it, it saved as a PSD, which is a Photoshop document, because JPEGs, like you get them from online, can't do layers, so it'll save as a PSD. So we have the 4 different layers, 4 different ties. Now we want to do is we want to select a tie area that we can cut out. There's several different ways to do this. I'm going to first show you, if you were interested in doing a real simple graphic straight-edged tie shape, you're going to draw it. You're going to draw it even though Photoshop is not a vector program, it has some tools that work a little bit like vector tools do, the pen tool, or you actually have this selection tool, this lasso tool, which lets you draw shapes. The thing about Photoshop is because, as I showed you in the last video, these are no longer separate shapes like they were when you drew them in Illustrator, so you can't just use this, this tool and just click and select, oops, I didn't get it, and just click and select something. It takes the whole layer. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to be able to make a shape, select a shape out of this, the tie shape. So there's several ways to do it. The one way will be to use this lasso tool. It's a polygonal or polygonal, I'm not sure the pronunciation, lasso tool, which lets you draw straight-edged lines to create a selection. First of all, just to show what a selection looks like, I'll use this marquee tool, which the marquee tool, like the shape drawing tool in Illustrator, you can draw different shapes. I'll just draw this rectangle. If I click and drag, what that means is I have selected the pixels that are inside my dashed lines, which are called marching ants. So everything inside this shape is selected, outside is not. What that means, I will show you. If I were to use the paintbrush tool, and I don't know why it's at 25%, and let's say I'm going to draw a line right across here. So you see, as I draw my line, I'm on the wrong layer. See, that's why it's exactly what I've told you not to do. When you're in the wrong layer, you can't see what you're doing. It looks like it didn't work. So I'm going to step backwards here with this. I'm going to come to this top layer. So if I draw my line like this, you'll see what happens. It only draws within the selection. So when you select something, it will only let you affect what's inside that selection. So that's why we do selections in Photoshop. So let me get rid of that. And we're going to Control or Command D will deselect. What I want to use is this polygonal lasso tool. What that does, it lets me click and draw things just like I could draw them in Illustrator with the pen tool. Now this is obviously a very lopsided tie, so that's not what I want to do. If you want to draw a tie that's symmetrical on both sides, let me Control D to deselect that. The best thing to do is use some guidelines. And just like in Illustrator, guidelines get dragged out of the rulers. So if you don't have your rulers, just like in Illustrator, it's under View, Rulers, or Command or Control R. So I'm going to just go into that ruler and drag out a guideline. I think the center of my tie, remember my pagoda was a little off-center, so I think this will be the center of my tie. Let's see, how wide do I want the tie to be? Well, this was running off the edge, so actually that might make my tie too wide. If I want to move it, I have to use the Move tool. So let me make this the center. And then you want it to be equally wide from the center. You could use the rulers up here to measure. I'm just sort of eyeballing it. Now I want to have the top of my tie, the top of the knot. Then you have, like, here's your tie shape, the bottom of the knot. Maybe it would be here. The points on the outside, which talking like point here and point here, that would maybe end up there, and then the bottom center point. I need a guideline for that. That might be here. Maybe I'll slide this down just a little bit to here maybe. Okay, so that's probably, maybe I could even make this a tiny bit wider. It's probably all the guidelines I need to draw a competent tie here that's equal on both sides. So now I'm going to use my lasso tool. I'd like to start at this bottom point. I don't know why, I've just kind of gotten in the habit of doing that. So I click where the guidelines intersect. Click here, and you see how it's drawing that Now here I didn't figure out how close to come in. I'll go about halfway. There's the knot across the top. Come in the same distance from my center line here. Come down to this point here where they intersect. And when I come to the original point, see that little 0? That means I'm creating my selection. So there it is, a selection of a tie shape. If you like it, you're done. That's it. The last step, though, will be to save that shape because you don't want to lose it. If I would deselect and then move on, how would I bring it back? And sometimes you spend a lot of work making a selection, so you want to save it. So anything that has to do with the selection is going to be under the Select menu. So while this selection, the marching ants are marching around there doing their thing, I'll go to Select, down to the bottom, Save Selection. It's saving it on the document. The channel is new, meaning it's a new selection. You're going to save it with a name. Well, you might have like 3 or 4 different selections sometimes on the document. So I want to know what this selection is. So I'm going to call it tie shape. So that way if I have to reselect it, I know what I'm looking for. And I'll say OK. So now you see if I do Command D and deselect, I can bring it back by going up to Selection, Load Selection, and then under Channel, I'm looking for, it's not that one. I called it tie shape. So I click on here. There it is, tie shape. I say OK, and it brings it right back. So now I've reloaded my selection. So now I am going to deselect. I'm also going to get, actually I need to save the whole document. It's not really saved until the document's saved again. And it's still going to save as a PSD. So now I want to show you a different way to draw a different sort of tie, maybe a bow tie, or maybe you don't like that particular kind of straight-edged tie drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my guidelines because they're kind of in my way. I don't really want to see them anymore. So I can say View Clear Guides, and that way I don't have them anymore. I don't have to worry about them. So now what if I would like to do a much more realistic tie shape? Well, in this case, what I did was I Googled ties and found different shapes. What you're looking for is an image of a tie with as plain of a background as possible, a plain white or plain any color, but as long as it's a solid background. And you can use any shape you want. If you like this shape with the neck ring or this shape, that's fine. Whatever shape, even something like this rolled up, I don't really care what shape you used as long as it works in your layout. So I picked, and I downloaded the picture. You also want to make sure it's a high enough resolution. If it's a real low-res picture, you're going to have a hard time making it work. So I saved one already into my folder, so I'm going to open it. File, Open. I go back to my working files. No, actually it wasn't in working files. I saved it in the tie project, but I saved it in Art Reference. So let me see. I found this one, which I thought was pretty nice. Well, actually, let me first do a bow tie. Whoops, that's not it. Here it is. I found this nice bow tie. Some of you might want to do bow ties. Now, I don't think a bow tie is going to work great for this particular pattern, but let's try it and see. So I'll say Open. It will, just like an Illustrator, open in a separate tab. So see that it has this perfectly white background and then the tie is there. So you want to select the tie to make the shape. In order to select it though, you don't want to have to draw around it. You could use, there is a magnetic lasso tool which kind of runs around the edge, but yeah, even that can get kind of goofy sometimes. So anytime you're in a command and you want to get out of it before you finish it, Command or Control period ends it. The easiest way to select this is using a magic wand tool. The magic wand tool will select all pixels that are the same color. So if I click on that, see it selected all those reds. That would be very complicated. I could use the Shift key and just like an Illustrator add to my selection, but I could go on forever. The easiest way to do this, and I'm going to deselect, Control D, is to select my background because that's all the same color white. And then I'm going to invert my selection to get my foreground, to get the tie. So select, inverse. There, and now I have my tie selection. But it's on this document. I want to bring it over to this document. Let me pull this tab down so I can see both documents. So how do I get this shape over to here? Well, you can drag and drop things from one document to another, and drag and drop is the same as copying and pasting. Here's the trick though. This Move tool, if I use that and drag and drop, what it drops into there is the artwork because the Move tool will move the artwork. That's not what I want. So I'm going to do Control Z, get rid of it. in order to move this selection, I need to be in a select tool. I could be in any select tool. I'll just be in the marquee tool, which is the simplest one. And you see if I come inside my selection, oh, not in that. Okay, I'm in the select tool. It's not doing it. Yep, it didn't do it. Okay. Let me try this one. Okay, yes. Sometimes something just doesn't quite work when it should. It's these computers get kind of messed up sometimes. So sometimes you have to save it, close out, and try again, or try a different tool. So in this tool, it works. See, here I am getting ready to draw a selection, but if I moved in here, see how it changes to that little arrow with the marching ants? That means it will move the selection. So if I click and drag this, see, it's dragging that selection over here. Bingo, there I have it. Now, of course, it's way too small. So I'm going to move it down around here, which is where I'll have to use it. Just, well, actually, I didn't show you how to enlarge and reduce things yet in Photoshop. I want to make that selection larger. So how do I do it? Once again, it's in the Select menu. Transform Selection. Transform Selection, and you get those handles, which you're very familiar with. So just like in Illustrator, I'm going to hold down the Shift key to keep it proportional and make it bigger. There we go. And like I said, this selection's not working real well. You're not going to really get the benefit of the moon or the, yeah, I wouldn't make a bow tie out of this particular design. It's going to look kind of silly. But anyway, that's what I wanted to do. That's how I would do it. I hit Enter, because you always have to enter just like in, and there you go. And there's my tie selection. So that's another, that's a second way to do a selection. So now let's say I wanted to do a nicer, I'm going to save this one too. So once again, I'll go to Select, Save Selection. Now the last time I just said tie shape. I should have said long tie, but this time I'll say bow tie shape. So I know the difference if I go back in here. Okay, so now I have, now you'll see if I go into, I'm going to deselect. If I go into Select, Load Selection, you'll see I have the choice of my original tie shape, or I can select either one. So I'm going to cancel that out. So now let's say I want to create a nice realistic looking tie, but a regular long tie. So let me open up my other pattern that I found. File, Open. And it is this one, a plum wine tie. I like the curve around here. So I'm going to do the same thing here using my magic wand. I'm going to click on here. Uh-oh, but this one has a shadow. Doesn't work quite as well. So here's a case where you will want to hold down the Shift key and come in here a few more times until you feel like you have just the tie shape. And I think that, well, down here is a little bit of the shadow. So. There we go. I think that's just the tie. So now I'm going to do the same thing. It's easier to pull this aside so I can see both documents. I'm going to use a selection tool. I'll use this one since it worked before. No, this doesn't seem to be working this time. Oh, I didn't invert my selection. So look, it's the background that's selected. So select, inverse. Now my tie is selected. So there, see, I move over into it. That means I'm going to move the selection. So I drag it over here. Once again, it's too small. Select, transform selection, and let me see how big I want it to be, holding the Shift key so I don't drag it out of proportion. I'm going to bring it to the top. I'm going to bring it to the bottom. And there we go. There's my tie shape. Maybe I'll just gets part of the pagoda, but that's okay. All right, now hit Return, and there's my tie shape. So now I need to save this selection also. So select, save selection. I'm going to call it Realistic Tie Shape. It doesn't matter what you name it as long as you know what it is so you can find it again. And I'll say OK, and I'm going to save my document. So those are two different ways that you can create a tie shape, by either finding a photograph and selecting it and bringing that shape in, or by drawing it if you want just a simple straight square graphic look, which sometimes looks kind of nice too. So that's all for this step. I'm going to, in the next step, show you how to bring your tie shape into another document.